So after I changed the front discs on my Fireblade, I realised that my rear brakes needed some love too. So today I'm going to be changing the rear disc as well. First up, I'm going to get the rear end on paddocks, and then I'll loosen the rear axle and the chain adjuster nuts on both sides. Then I'll remove the axle fully while supporting the wheel and moving it forward a touch in order to remove the chain. Now the wheel has been removed, it's time to get the old disc off. I'm pretty sure this is a factory rear disc and has never been off, as these bolts were very stiff. So this rear disc wasn't warped, but it had a large lip, and obviously I wanted it to match my nice new wavy fronts. While the old disc is off, clean up the contact points with a wire brush, put the new disc on and insert the bolts. Make sure you've put thread lock on the bolts. This is something that I didn't mention in my previous vid as I just forgot. Next up, torque them to spec in a cross pattern, of course. In my case, they required 18 Newton meters of torque. And then make sure to clean the discs up with some sort of brake cleaner, as they are shipped with oil on them to stop them corroding. It's also ideal to replace the pads when doing the discs, so that your discs and pads will then both wear evenly throughout use, and any imperfections from either won't be carried over. I've already done this in a previous vid, but make sure you've done it before putting the wheel back on, as the caliper sits on a sliding bracket here and is then secured by the axle. Clean and re-grease the axle if needed, then it's time to position the wheel. I support the back wheel with a block of wood to make things easier when you put the chain back on, so make sure the chain is on and the caliper is seated correctly on the disc and swing arm bracket, and then slide the axle back in. This one did need a little bit of persuading with a rubber mallet, and then make sure the wheel is all the way forward, and then put your spacers in either side and get your axle nut on hand tight. Now's a good time to make sure your chain is tensioned correctly. You can do this by adjusting the chain tensioners either side. Make sure to consult your manual for the correct amount of slack that your chain needs. Also make sure the wheel is straight by using the notches either side to line things up correctly. Before torquing everything to spec, a good tip I've heard is to depress the rear brake so the pistons and pads will squeeze on the disc, giving you a better alignment before torquing everything to spec. Then you're ready to tighten the axle nut and torque it to spec. In my case, it's 113 Newton meters of torque. After that, tighten the lock nuts on the tensioners to make sure that everything stays in place. Make sure to spin the rear tyre and pump the rear brake to make sure the wheel stops, and then you're good to go. Obviously, make sure you're bedding the disc and pads in for the first couple 100 miles, and as always, ride safe.